You gather your breath. It is one moment indeed to take in. And at the moment, we are also joined by Fr Simon Donnelly, who is a priest of Archdiocese of Johannesburg. Father, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let's start with just how significant a moment this is for the Catholic Church.
Good evening to you. It's a very emotional and special moment for us.
All right, Father Donnelly, unable to hear you clearly at this time, but I'm going to keep the conversation going with Linda Mnisi, if Linda, you can still hear me. So you've described at least part of the process, and that is that that person who has now been elected as the new Pope, they will be asked the question, do you accept the role? And if the answer is yes, what name do they choose that they will be called by? Let's talk about the Catholic Church, Linda, as you've already explained that it is growing everywhere else except Europe. So what does that tell us as to where perhaps this Pope is likely to come from? We know that at the moment they have yet to be revealed as to who they are, but where might they come from, given that this church is growing everywhere else? Which are the favorite places, perhaps? What is the talk on the ground?
I mean, Polly, there's quite a number of predictions, right, that came before we saw the white smoke. And a number of cardinals, some coming from Africa, others European countries. But there's just been a number of names that have been flying around. I mean, if you look at social media, some from America were even suggesting that Cardinal Dolan from New York, seemingly because of his style and how, you'd often see him on social media talking about the day-to-day happenings of this period and where they're going next, what meetings they are attending, could possibly be one of those. But also Cardinal Sarah, you would have heard the little boy that I interviewed earlier on mentioning his name, because it is among those that, were mentioned quite a lot. Quite a number of, names have been thrown around. But of course, again, he who walks into the conclave, a pope, walks out a cardinal. And that will determine, or rather the confirmation of that famous quote will be confirmed when newly elected Pope will be introduced to the scores of people here at the St. Peter's Square. He'll be coming through from the balcony that, in fact, is so significant, especially in the last couple of weeks, because it is the last day, among the last spots that Pope Francis was spotted at during his last appearances. So it'll be quite interesting to see where the next Pope comes from. But of course, the issue around the papal name that the next Pope will choose. History tells us that a lot of the popes that were previously appointed would ordinarily take the direction of choosing their predecessor's papal name. So could it be that the upcoming or the newly elected Pope will choose Pope Francis, because obviously he was the first to choose Francis as his papal name, setting perhaps a precedent for others who may choose the same. That still remains unclear, but of course is a possibility given the sheer number of people that were appointed, or cardinals that were appointed by him as cardinals, over 108, in fact, at least 108 of those cardinals were appointed by him. But of course, it also does not mean that just because they were appointed by him, they would automatically lean towards, his beliefs, his ways, and perhaps things that he stood for.
Yeah.
Especially considering, of course, the fact that many of them come from different countries, but also some of the countries that are very conservative. Some of them are even known to be conservative in nature. But of course, one of the things that the people here on the Catholics were telling us is that they don't see, the racial lines or the racial borders or the geographical borders. Those to them don't matter. What matters is, the faith, and of course choosing a candidate that is suitable, that will be able to take the church forward. Interesting, because they've outlined some of the qualities that they want the next pope to have. And I was asking Father Mngambi earlier on in terms of what if the person that is voted for does not necessarily fit into the box being carved out by the current leadership of the church or the cardinals themselves. Would the church be now forced to make a compromise? And he says, well, absolutely yes, because where he falls short, the Holy Spirit, as they believe, would then fill up that gap, because that is very much a possibility due to the nature of the election of a pope. It's by secret ballot. They're not allowed to talk to each other. They're not allowed to read newspapers, to hear what you and I at the moment are talking about, what the general commentary is on the ground.
Yeah.
Technical sweeps are done to ensure that this process is, of course, kept to its original form of maintaining secrecy, because, of course, there's also the understanding that these people are human beings, so there needs to be those safeguards that ensures that, of course, the secrecy is kept as per the constitution of the church. Pauline?
Mngambi, once again, thank you indeed. We're going to pause you there for a moment while we bring into the conversation Father Simon Donnelly, a priest of Archdiocese of Johannesburg. Father Donnelly, I hope the line to you is much clearer now. Before we get into just how long the wait is going to be before we see the new Pope, let's start with your reflections on the significance of this moment.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It's hugely significant for all Catholics, really for Christians in general, because this is the Lord's words to Saint Peter, that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And so we see the Pope as his successor, and so there is a new Pope. This is a moment of great joy for us. And it's a period now of just waiting and seeing, how has the Holy Spirit inspired the cardinal electors to choose, and whom have they chosen,
Yeah.
So it's a moment of great joy.
I can hear the tremble in your voice, Father, and I guess it does signify just how important a moment this is for the Catholic Church. Just reading through some information that is coming through to us, there is a suggestion that the Vatican radio, at least an expert talking on that, saying tonight that it could take some 30 to 40 minutes before we know who the new Pope is. Do you know what processes are to follow from here on?
Well, the poor man who has been chosen, because really, in a sense, this is now the mission for the rest of his life until his death. And so he will have been, each of the cardinal electors will have greeted him, paid respect to him in the Sistine Chapel where they voted him, and he will be accompanied right now, it's probably into what they call the Room of Tears, just behind the Sistine Chapel, near where the little oven is that makes the smoke come out, and there they will have white vestments, a cassock for him in 3 different sizes, because they didn't know, was he going to be short or medium height or tall?
Yeah.
And they will put that on him and then prepare him to come and give this first words to the city and to the world, urbi et orbi. So yes, that could take anywhere from half an hour to an hour, definitely. And at the moment, the most extraordinary scene will be unfolding in Rome. Maybe you've had a chance to see visuals, but people will literally be running through the city, saying the same Latin words, habemus papam, habemus papam, we have a pope. You know, it's an extraordinary sight to behold, because I did with some others who were in Rome 20 years ago when Pope Benedict was elected. So people will be streaming to St. Peter's Square, literally tens of thousands of people. Buses will simply stop functioning because the square will fill up, and it'll fill up to, you know, its full size of 300,000 people and more, because people are waiting, you know.
Yeah.
While it was hard to say goodbye to Pope Francis, very hard, and now, you know, we will welcome the new son of the church, whom the cardinals have chosen, you know, to lead us as pastor.
The Pope, the person who is going to be the Pope, Father Donnelly, the understanding, and you will correct me as we go along here, the understanding of the process is that, I think, as you've mentioned in part, they're going to get changed, pray and be greeted by the fellow cardinals. But you mentioned the room of tears. That is quite a solemn moment, we understand. Do you have any more knowledge as to what happens in that room? Because this individual gets to sit there for quite a bit of time, perhaps a moment of reflection.
At this point, essentially, the new Pope is saying goodbye to the rest of his life. You know, in one sense, his private life pretty much ceases, because he will be a very public figure and will serve the church very publicly. And so that's why it's called the Room of Tears. But no, there are no particular rites there, the cardinals having greeted him and him being vested and prepared to give a blessing. And of course, he will have to have, you know, chosen the name that he will have chosen. So that will be announced before he comes out and gives the blessing and the greeting. So I presume, hopefully, he will have already thought about the name he would like to take, you know.
Talking about the enormity of this moment, I'd like for us to speculate for a moment, Father Donnelly, because we don't know who the new Pope is just yet, and perhaps it gives us that opportunity to sort of speculate where the new Pope will have come from in the corners of the world, the four corners of the world. My colleague earlier, Linda Mnisi, saying that what has clearly come out over the last few years is that the Catholic Church is growing everywhere else in the world except in Europe. Might that tell us whether or not this new Pope does or does not come from Europe?
Look, yes and no. Don't write Europe off yet. 10,000 new Catholics were baptized at Easter in France. That is a massive number of new people. So, yeah, don't write the old world, as it were, off quite yet. But you're right. Most expansion is certainly occurring in Africa and Asia. And you know, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, did obviously diversify the College of Cardinals, I think very much with that in mind. And they are extremely diverse now, coming from more than 70 countries. So, but I heard what Linda was saying earlier, and it's true. While, you know, the cardinals represent the church across the world, we never really see the Pope as being tied to a particular culture or race or background. You know, of course he has a background and he comes from a place, but he's not made Pope to represent that place. So Pope Francis was very clear on that he was not. He was called the Argentinian Pope, but in fact he never even went back to Argentina during his papacy, which was, I think, a heart sore for the Argentinians, but he wanted to make it clear that he was here to serve the people of God throughout the world, you know. So whether the new Pope is black or white or any other shade of the rainbow, his job is to serve the Christian people, you know. And if he doesn't speak Italian, he'll have to learn, you know. But there have been many non-Italian popes over the centuries, just not many recently, you know. Yeah. We've had the last 3, but that was an anomaly, if you like, a good anomaly. But for the previous 400 and something years, there had been no non-Italian. So let's see. But there are some extremely capable Italians, you know, cardinals working not only in Italy, in different parts of the world. So who knows?
Father Simon Donnelly, can I ask you to just stay on the line? We are going to take you back to the Vatican City now. Linda Mnisi, my colleague, on the ground there. Linda, we've just seen what I think you have been referring to over some time as the Swiss Guard. They seem to have been doing some rounds around the square. Describe what they have just conducted right now. All right, Linda Mnisi, I'm going to have to come in there. It's simply too loud where you are. Father Donnelly, if you're still with me, as I tried to describe to Linda what is going on, clearly the crowds are drowning him out, and so he obviously will need to find a slightly quieter spot. That's going to be a challenge given the excitement there today. Just explain to us the role of the Swiss Guard, Father Donnelly. What do they represent? What is their significance there?
The Swiss Guard, each of these things has grown organically over the centuries. There was no sort of little plan from the beginning to have these ones and those ones working in Rome or at the Vatican. But the Swiss Guards from the 1500s onwards have been the Pope's personal protection. They were known for being very disciplined and neutral and so forth. And so 500 years ago, just over 500 years ago, the Pope said, well, I need protection because Rome had been sacked by French Emperor Charles V. And so he called on a set of Swiss Guards to come and protect him. And in fact, many of them were killed in that sack of Rome. So they have a very close relationship to the Pope, and in fact, the anniversary of that slaughter of Swiss Guards was just a few days ago, I think 2 days ago, and they will have renewed their oath normally to the new Pope, but now there isn't a new Pope. Their job is to protect the person of the Roman Pontiff, which was Pope Francis and will be the new Pope, And so whenever you see them, you know that the Pope is present.
Yeah.
If you see them standing outside Santa Marta or the bronze door on the square or the balcony, then you know that the Pope is present. When he's not present, they disappear. So they are one of the two security forces in Vatican City.
Yes.
They're very gentle but extremely capable.
Yes. Yeah. Once the Pope does emerge from that window that we periodically are shown in the visuals, how long a time does he stay there for? Does he make a public address?
Short, normally. It's called, so twice a year the Pope makes an urbi et orbi, that's Latin for to the city of Rome and to the world, an address, usually at Easter and New Year, and then today when he's elected. So it'll be very short. He may offer a few words of encouragement. He's normally rather startled at the role that has now been thrust upon him, and offers a blessing. In the case of Pope John Paul II in 1978, on the 16th of October, when he was introduced as the first most people didn't know who he was, the first non-Italian Pope in 450 years, his first words were, "Do not be afraid. Throw open the doors to Christ." And those words were a great balm of the soul of a very troubled time, the end of the Cold War. Do not be afraid. And he's quoting the Lord Jesus. And then Pope Benedict said, I am a humble servant in the Lord's vineyard. And then Pope Francis asked the people to pray for him, So each Pope will do as he sees best, and he's really just greeting them and then giving them a blessing.
Well, those first few words are going to be held on to for some time, I guess, for the duration of this Pope being in that position. Father Donnelly, once again, can I ask you to just hold the line? Linda Mnisi seems to have found a spot. Linda, if you are with us, just describe to us what you are seeing right now.
Okay, Tony, so the crowds have been waiting in anticipation, of course, for the introduction of the new Pope. They keep, of course, celebrating here. People coming out from nearby areas, and on the balcony here at the Vatican City, really shifting their focus, almost as if there is now a shift in the people's focus from the rooftop of the Sistine Chapel, which stands just on the right of the crowd from the St. Peter's Basilica right to the balcony where that new Pope will be introduced to the public in more or less 45 minutes. So the wait and the countdown is on, and you can already see people flying flags from different countries as perhaps, basically just trying to perhaps predict that maybe the newly elected Pope comes from their country. Because obviously, otherwise, nobody knows that there's at this point, and so, at this point, while we know there's a new Pope, we just don't know who it is. So you see the prediction flags that are flying around. I mean, earlier on you'd have seen, I spoke to a guy from Nigeria as well, who out.
All right, that line to Linda Mnisi just keeps failing us, but you can understand the reasons behind that. Possibly every other individual is on their mobile phone, and so there is simply a saturation there of the airwaves. We are going to put Linda on pause once again. Father Donnelly, if you're still with me, the understanding that from today's processes, once they conclude, there is what is going to be called a mass inauguration. Just explain to us what that is and when does it follow? When exactly does it take place?
That's really up to the Holy See to announce. Today is, Thursday, probably on Saturday or Sunday. But there would be an installation. It used to be called an enthronement, but an installation of the new Pope, where he will be given what's called the fisherman's ring. He will have had a ring made. The ring is a sign of faithfulness to the office of the Pope, the teaching and governing office of the Pope, of the successor to St. Peter. So it's very solemn and very beautiful. And it may or may not be Holy Mass. We'll have to see. But it's likely to happen within the shortest possible time. They will have been preparing for that, but if the conclave had taken a few days longer, then it would have been probably the following week, So it'll all be announced through the Vatican News and Vatican media, but it'll be very, very soon.
Yeah.
Give a chance to prepare, and while cardinals, of course, are still there, because they'll all be there, and then everybody else is welcome who's in Rome, basically, priests, lay people, everybody.
Whilst we have a window to speculate, Father Donnelly, how big a moment would this be if it were an African Pope that were to emerge? Or should we say a Pope of African descent?
Sure. Obviously it would be very significant, and in the modern period it would be unprecedented. It's certainly not the first time in history. There have been 3 African popes, but a long time ago, and very significant, each of them. We tend to have short memories, but the beautiful thing in the church is she's young, but she's also old, and so she's full of life. But I mean, the African presence in the early church was extremely important because all of North Africa was Christian. The entire swathe of North Africa, from Egypt in the northeast to Morocco and Algiers in the northwest and Tunisia.
How long ago? You say that there have been 3.
In a long period, this has never happened, so it'll be very significant.
Yes. Just how recent, or should we say how long a time ago, would we have had a Pope of African descent?
Oh, it hasn't. We haven't had one for 16 centuries. So Pope Victor and Pope Miltiades and Gelasius, who probably was born in North Africa, they were all within the first 4 centuries, of the church. So 1600 years ago, but. They each have their role to play. One stabilized the date of Easter, one introduced the spoken language of the church because people couldn't speak Greek anymore. Each of them had a different role. It's been a long time.
The world is in turmoil at the moment, and it's almost as if it's a recurring thing that happens in the world with, I suppose, every pope. There are challenges that they have to confront. What moment do you think this Pope comes in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, each one faces the situation of the present day, and so in many ways, certain things that we thought were resolved in Cold War, the hostility between East and West and different ideologies, have resurfaced in different ways. And Pope Francis was often saying, look, in some ways, a third world war is being fought already in pieces, he used to say, in different parts of the world. So, and we don't even have to name all the conflicts, we can see them. So he doesn't think that he can solve all of those, but he must be a messenger of peace, and each of the last 5, 6, 7 popes, more, 10 of the 20th century have been very important as messengers of peace, not always successful. One of them died of a broken heart, they said, between World War I and II, because he tried to avert hostilities, So they must take that on, and all of the conflicts we see and the great movement of peoples, which Pope Francis made so much, a theme of his pontificate, right? The movement of peoples fleeing different situations, different countries. The meeting of cultures, the clash of cultures, but that's not only a clash, opportunity for sharing ideas, and trying to share human wisdom and trying to understand one another, before we force religion on each other, but, to try to see each other as children of God. So, he'll have his work cut out for him, and of course he will bring experience, the new Pope, from wherever he comes, There are popes, there are cardinals right now, who are from areas of major conflict, and who have stood up to oppressive regimes and who have tried to be prophetic witnesses in their own places while, not alienating authorities. It's a very delicate act. So I'm sure the new Pope will be aware of all of that.
Father Donnelly, once again, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line while both you and I catch a breath. Let's just take in the sounds from the St. Peter's Square. If you're just joining us, a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to this day of jubilation at the Vatican City. And that's because a little after 6 o'clock this evening, white smoke began bellowing out of the chimney at the Sistine Chapel. And that was a significant moment because it signified that a new pope had just been elected. We have yet to see who the new pope is, and we have yet to be told what the name of the new pope is going to be, but there are processes that are going to be undertaken before we can actually get to see that moment when they appear on the balcony. You may have seen that shot of the balcony every sort of once in a while, or should I say periodically, and there it is, that balcony I am referring to. The understanding is that it is going to be one of the senior cardinals. In fact, it will be one that would have been in charge of this whole process that will appear on that balcony. This would be a senior cardinal. In fact, they referred to as the senior cardinal deacon, who will appear on the balcony of the St. Peter's Basilica and announce that we have a new pope, quote unquote. We have a new pope. Those will be the names from the senior cardinal deacon. Then it will be followed, that announcement, by the new pope's chosen name. And once that has happened, the first blessing will be the new pope, who then steps onto the balcony and gives his first address, it would appear. But in this instance, it's referred to as the first blessing to the city and to the world. And just as we explain all of these processes that are going to follow, the one person who has the advantage that none of us here in Johannesburg have, Lindamnisi, taking in all of what is happening there. You see people waving flags of their respective countries, scenes of jubilation. Linda, good evening to you once again. We have been struggling to get a hold of you, perhaps because of the saturation of the networks. People are probably on their phones, calling relatives at home about this moment that they find themselves in at the Vatican City. Explain to us what you have observed thus far.
All right, so scenes of jubilation continue to play out here at the St. Peter's Square, and now all eyes have shifted to the Vatican balcony, where now they wait the revelation of who the next pope is. You know, it's interesting to watch how that shift, has been almost immediately, really, after that smoke came out from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. People are shifting their eyes and moving towards the balcony of the St. Peter's Basilica. This way, of course, the new pope will be elected. The crowds will know who he is, which country he is from, and what papal name he has chosen. Obviously, it will be an issue of great, particularly when it comes to what he stands for, and whether or not the continuation of what he says. Many of the people here have been reflecting on the journey that this church in over the past couple of years since his appointment as the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, and that journey is one to the periphery, from the outer lines of society, being one with the poor, and of course allowing and pushing the boundaries of the church to show sympathy to the LGBTI community, but also pulling along and picking up problem for, particularly.
All right, Lindamnisi, once again disappearing, all because the assumption is that, first of all, it is just noisy where he is, so completely drowned out, but also the line completely jammed where he is. But we are fortunate because we have with us Father Simon Donnelly, the Archdiocese priest of Johannesburg. Father Donnelly, you're still with me, I take it? All right, I'm told that Father Donnelly may have disappeared as well. And so it is left to me to explain to you the processes that are likely to unfold as I have attempted to do so earlier. So let's remind you once again of the processes that are likely to follow after what you are seeing now. So after the smoke, not much has happened since then. If anything, we saw all right, I'm told Father Simon is back, and that's why I'm trying to remember my thought process. Father Donnelly, you are back with us. I wanted to pick up with you on the meeting with the cardinals. The understanding is that there will be a private meeting between the elected Pope and the cardinals who would have elected him. Talk to us about just how big an exchange that is going to be and what is possibly the content of that exchange.
I have to confess ignorance here. I have no idea. That's really between the Pope and the Cardinals. I have no idea. They will simply have greeted him after his election now. A moment of great joy and tenderness and quite emotional. And in terms of them meeting and discussing, I'm sure that will continue, beginning tomorrow. But I have no inside information on that, to be honest. The Pope will have a large say in how that would work. But absolutely, I mean, he will need them. They've elected him. Now they're going to need to support him, with their own wisdom and and he will rely on them, and he will rely on them very closely for governing the universal church, the entire pontificate. I mean, a Pope is not a one-man job. It's to be shared with cardinal electors, cardinals from all over the world. So, for example, our very own Cardinal Napier, Archbishop of Durban, now Archbishop Emeritus, was a key figure in supporting Pope Francis, and he served on commissions in Vatican City, for the entire pontificate, and was regarded as an important reference point.
Yes.
And I'm sure Cardinal Brislin will have his own role to play, our Archbishop of Johannesburg. So, the new Pope, he will probably know some of the cardinals. It depends where he comes from. If he's from a country which is new to the group of cardinals, if you like, from countries in Africa or Asia where there's never been a cardinal before, perhaps, he won't know many cardinals. But if he's from the Roman Curia or one of the ones involved in, delicate international situations, then he may know a number of them. But however it is, he will need to get to know them more, because he'll need to know how to delegate, tasks to them. The job of a cardinal is to help the Pope administer the church. That's his job. And he's always a Roman citizen, so he will carry a Vatican passport. And in the old days, cardinals would always live in Rome. Nowadays, of course, not. But the idea is very much to be part of the Roman government of the church, trying to keep the mission of St. Peter the Apostle, to look after my lamb, to feed my sheep, as it says in the Gospel of St. John.
Part of the formalities that I understand he is going to undergo, Father Donnelly, is that he will sign official documents, and of course that is also coupled with his new names and details that will be formally registered. But here's the element I think the public would also be interested in. There is some significance attached to the ring that the Pope wears. That ring is prepared, I understand, and formally presented to him depending on tradition and timing. Do you have any information around that as to the preparation of the ring?
I have no details, I'm afraid, on the preparation itself, except it will need to bear his seal. The old use of a ring for anybody in any position, we still have that with seals in public offices. Sometimes it's like a stamp, an official stamp of the government, or we have to pay for a certain kind of a stamp to indicate that it's been approved by a government office, or in the older days, a king or a monarch, or in this case, a pope, to show that it is something approved by him. It would be stamped with his ring. Now, that may be used less now, but in terms of a seal in wax or in something like that. But nevertheless, the ring is significant as the commitment of his office and the commitment to the ministry of Peter. A priest, in a non-trivial way, we are wedded to the church. He is the bride of Christ, and we are to be husbands, if you like, to the church, as Christ is the spouse to his church. So the Pope, in a very special way, has that role, It is to be the representative of Jesus Christ on earth. We're quite clear that Christ is the head of the church, not the Pope, ultimately, but nevertheless, he is the representative, the vicar, and so of Jesus Christ on earth. And so that ring is significant, and the ring indicates his authority, but also uniquely that he has approved something. And it remains to be seen how maybe there's already a design, or he already has, once they know who the new Pope is, which is just in the last minutes, they will be preparing all kinds of things, letterheads, and ultimately they will even redesign, it'll take weeks, but they will redesign the most beautiful thing in the Vatican Gardens, which is the coat of arms of the new Pope made up out of flowers and plants, because they always do this. It's a massive thing. That'll take a while, obviously. Yes. But the ring will be prepared, and then it will be formally given to him when he's installed in a few days. So he won't be signing, I don't think, anything for now, until he's installed. But he is the new Pope. He is the point of reference, so he has the fullness of the teaching office of the Church.
Yes.
Which is called the Munus, the teaching office,
Father Donnelly, I want to thank you sincerely for what you have shared with us this evening as to the significance of this moment for the Catholic Church. Father Simon Donnelly has been with us since the moment the smoke started, the white smoke, I should be specific, started billowing out of that chimney.